Captain Maya Hudson walked through the dark corridors of Outpost 7, with her flashlight cutting through the shadows like a knife. The power had flickered 3 times in the last hour, and she needed to find out why. Her boots made soft sounds on the metal floor as she moved, deeper into the maintenance section where few people ever went. Outpost 7 was not an important place. It sat on the edge of human space where nothing ever happened. The war with the Dominion Empire had been going on for 7 years, but it was far away from here. Maya and her crew of 40 people just watched. Empty space and filed reports that nobody read. She turned a corner near the waste recycling section and stopped. Her flashlight beam caught something that should not be there. At first she thought it was a pile of old cloth or garbage, but then it moved. Maya stepped closer and her heart jumped into her throat. It was a child. The small figure was curled up behind the large processors, trying to hide in the shadows. Maya could see thin arms and legs that looked like they might break if touched too hard. The skin was pale silver and seemed to glow slightly in the dark. 2 large eyes stared at her with terror, and the pointed ears told Maya this was not human. Maya knelt down slowly and put her flashlight on the floor so it would not shine in the child's eyes. She held up both hands to show she meant no harm. The child pressed back against the wall and made a small sound like a frightened animal. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Maya's mind raced through protocols and regulations. She should call security. She should report an unidentified alien on the station. During wartime, this could be a spy or a trick. But all she saw was a starving child who looked ready to die from fear. Maya made her choice. She stood up slowly and walked to the nearby supply closet. She took out an emergency blanket and a ration pack. When she came back, the child had not moved. Maya opened the ration pack and placed it on the floor between them. Then she stepped back and sat down against the opposite wall. The child watched her for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, hunger won over fear. Small hands reached out and grabbed the food. The child ate like someone who had not seen food in days and maybe had not. Maya waited until the food was gone, then slowly stood and held out the blanket. The child looked at the blanket, then at Maya's face. Something passed between them in that moment. The child took the blanket and wrapped it around thin shoulders. Maya pointed to herself and said her name slowly, Maya. Then she pointed at the child with raised eyebrows. The child's voice was barely a whisper, and the word was strange, but Maya heard it. Clearly, Lire. Maya smiled and repeated it. Lire. The child nodded. And for the first time, the terror in those large eyes faded just a little, getting Lire back to her private quarters. Without being seen was harder than Maya expected. The child could barely walk, and Maya ended up carrying the small body wrapped in the blanket. Lire weighed almost nothing, and that made Maya angry at whoever had let a child get this thin. Once inside her quarters, Maya set up the small spare room that she used for storage. She brought more food and water and clean clothes that were far too big. Lire ate slowly this time and drank the water like it was the most precious thing in the universe. Over the next 3 days, Maya learned that Lire could not speak human language. They communicated with hand signs and drawings. Lire drew pictures on Maya's tablet, and some of them made no sense. Strange symbols that looked like writing but matched nothing in the station's database. Pictures of burning ships and falling cities. And one drawing that made Maya's blood run cold. It showed a tall figure with what might be wings, standing in the middle of flames and destruction. Around the figure were smaller shapes that looked like they were bowing or maybe running away. Lire pointed at the picture, then at herself, then made a gesture. Maya did not understand. Katie Wells was Maya's second in command and her closest friend on the station. When she found out about Lire, she was not happy. Katie stood in Maya's quarters with her arms crossed and her face showing worry and anger mixed together. This could mean court-martial, Katie said. This could mean prison for both of them. During wartime, harboring an unregistered alien was serious. What if Lire was dangerous, or a spy, or carried some disease they had never seen before? Maya knew Katie was right about all of it. But every time she looked at Lire sleeping in the spare room, wrapped in blankets and finally looking peaceful. She knew she could not turn the child over to military intelligence. They would put Lee Ray in a cell and run tests and treat her like a thing instead of a person. Katie sighed and sat down. She would keep the secret, she said, but Maya needed to figure out what to do soon. They could not hide Lee Ray forever on a station with 40 people who all knew each other. On the fourth night, Maya woke up to find Lee Ray standing by her bed. The child was shaking and pointing at the tablet she clutched in both hands. Maya turned on the light and looked at what Lee Ray had drawn. It was a fleet of ships, hundreds of them drawn in careful detail with the symbol that Maya recognized immediately. The Dominion Empire. Lee Ray had drawn them coming towards something that looked like Outpost 7 and the nearby colonies. Maya felt ice form in her stomach. She pointed at the drawing and then at the window showing the stars outside. Lee Ray nodded hard and held up fingers. Maya counted them. 12. 12 hours. Intelligence said the Dominion would not reach this sector for months. They had time to prepare and evacuate if needed. But Lee Ray was saying they would be here in 12 hours, and something in those wide, frightened eyes made Maya believe her. Lee Ray touched Maya's hand and then pointed at the drawing again. She opened her mouth and spoke a word in human, language that was rough and accented but clear. Sorry. Maya stared at the child and then at the drawing of the invasion fleet. Her mind raced. If Lee Ray was right, they had almost no time. If she was wrong, Maya would look like a fool for sounding the alarm over a child's drawing. But if she did nothing and Lee Ray was right, thousands of people would die. Maya grabbed her communicator and called Katie. "Get to the command center now," she said. Then she looked at Lee Ray and made a promise without words that she would protect this child no matter what was coming. She just hoped she could keep that promise when the Dominion arrived. The Dominion fleet appeared exactly when Lee Ray said it would. Maya had spent the last 12 hours preparing for something she hoped would not happen, but the child had been right. The sensors screamed warnings as hundreds of enemy ships dropped out of hyperspace and filled the viewing screens with their dark holes. Katie stood next to Maya in the command center, and her face was pale. Outpost 7 had 3 defensive platforms and 40 crew members. The Dominion had brought enough firepower to destroy a planet. This was not a fight they could win. Maya ordered emergency protocols. Every civilian station in the sector received evacuation warnings. The mining colony on New Haven started loading 12,000 people onto transport ships as fast as they could, but the Dominion was faster. Their landing craft were already heading toward the colony's surface. Maya watched the tactical display and felt helpless. Her 3 defensive platforms fired at the incoming Dominion ships, but it was like throwing stones at a mountain. The enemy barely noticed. Their return fire started tearing apart the platforms one by one. Then Katie grabbed Maya's arm and pointed at a security monitor. The quarters where Lee Ray had been staying were empty. The child was gone. Maya's heart stopped. She sent security teams to search, but part of her already knew they would not find Lee Ray on the station. She pulled up the security footage and watched something impossible. The recording showed Lee Ray walking to an airlock and opening it. The child stepped out into space without a suit, and the door closed behind her. No human could survive that. No known alien could survive that. But the footage was clear, and Lee Ray was gone. The command center filled with new alarm sounds. Katie pointed at the main screen with shaking hands. Every sensor on the station was going crazy with readings that made no sense. Space itself seemed to be tearing open between Outpost 7 and the Dominion fleet. A ship emerged from the rift and Maya forgot how to breathe. It was unlike anything in the human database. The hull looked organic, like it had been grown instead of built. Vines and crystal formations covered the surface, and they glowed with inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The ship was ancient and beautiful and terrifying all at once. A boarding pod launched from the strange ship and headed straight for Outpost 7's main docking bay. Maya grabbed her sidearm and ran with Katie and a security team following close behind. If this was an attack, they would defend their station, even if it was hopeless. They reached the docking bay as the pod connected. Maya positioned her team with weapons ready and waited. The airlock hissed open, and Maya raised her gun. Then she lowered it slowly as her brain tried to process what she was seeing. Lyrae stepped out first. The child looked completely different. She wore robes of silver and deep green that looked expensive and elegant. Her silver skin seemed to glow brighter, and her hair had been cleaned and braided with small crystals woven through it. She looked like a princess from an old story, but it was the woman behind. Lyrae that made Maya's security team take a step back. She was tall, much taller than any human, with a body that looked thin but strong like a sword blade. Her features were perfect in a way that seemed carved from moonlight, and her hair flowed down to her waist in waves of liquid silver. She wore armor that looked grown from the same crystal as the ship and carried. No weapons that Maya could see. The woman's eyes were the most frightening part. They were ancient. Maya looked into those eyes and saw ages beyond counting. This being had watched stars be born and die. She had seen civilizations rise and fall to dust. She had survived things that would break anyone else. The woman looked at Maya, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or judgment, or gratitude. The woman placed one hand over her heart in what had to be a gesture of respect. Then she spoke a single word in perfect human language that had no accent at all. Captain Maya did not know what to say. Her security team stood frozen. Katie made a small sound that might have been fear or awe, or both. Lyrae stepped forward and started speaking in her own language while making hand gestures. She was trying to translate. The woman was Lyrae's mother. Her name was something that human tongues could not properly say, but the closest was Keleth. She was asking how she could repay the debt of her child's life being saved. Maya's mind was blank. How did you answer a question like that from a being that looked like she could break planets? Before she could find words, the alarm started again. 3 Dominion cruisers had broken through the defensive. Linemen were targeting the refugee ships fleeing from New Haven. Thousands of civilians would die in minutes. Maya looked at the tactical display showing the doomed transport ships. She looked at Keleth, standing with that ancient, patient expression. Maya made a decision based on instinct, and hope and desperation all mixed together. She pointed at the refugee ships on the screen. Save them. Keleth's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. She nodded once, then spoke in her own melodic language. Behind her, through the viewport, Maya saw the ancient ship split open like a flower blooming. Something emerged from inside, and Maya felt her legs go weak. The dragon was bigger than the largest human battleship. Its scales were black as the space between stars and covered with crystal formations that caught light and bent it into colors that should not exist. When its wings unfolded, they seemed to tear. Holes in space itself, Katie whispered the dragons. Name that Lyrae had told them. Thornscale, he had been sleeping for 3,000 years waiting for his bonded partner to need him. That time had come. Maya watched through the viewport as Thornscale moved through space like a living ship. He was impossibly fast for something so massive. The dragon reached the Dominion cruisers in seconds, and what happened next would become legend throughout. Human space, Thornscale did not use weapons because he was the weapon. His breath came out as crystalline energy that froze ships in place, making them unable to move or fight. His claws tore through hull plating that was supposed to withstand nuclear blasts. His roar disrupted every electronic system across the entire enemy fleet. The 3 Dominion cruisers that had been about to destroy the refugee ships were gone in less than 3 minutes. Thornscale had not just defeated them, he had erased them. The dragon turned and flew back toward the ancient ship. As he passed Outpost 7, his massive head turned to look through the viewport. His eyes met Maya's, and she saw intelligence there. Ancient, patient intelligence that had existed longer than human civilization. Thornscale was not a pet or a beast. He was a person in his own right, and he had chosen to help because Keleth asked him to. Maya turned back to find Keleth standing beside her at the command station. The ancient woman was watching her dragon work with an expression that might have been pride or love or both. Katie moved closer and whispered urgently that they needed to know who these beings were and what they wanted. Keleth heard and made a decision. She spoke, and her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of ages and loss and wisdom that humanity had not yet earned. She would tell them everything. Keleth stood in the command center and told them a story that changed everything. Maya thought she knew about the war. Her people were called the Elithar. They were old when humanity's ancestors were still in the oceans learning to breathe air. The Elithor had built an empire that spanned galaxies and lived in peace for millions of years. Then the enemy came. Keleth's voice stayed soft, but Maya heard the pain underneath. The enemy was not like the wars humanity knew. It was not about territory or resources or politics. The enemy wanted to consume everything. Every living thing, every thought and dream and hope. They wanted to eat the universe itself. The war that followed burned across multiple galaxies. Entire star systems were destroyed. Planets were cracked open. Suns were snuffed out like candles. The Elithor fought with everything they had and barely won. When the war finally ended, only a handful of her people survived. The survivors made a choice. They scattered across space and took vows of silence and isolation. They would hide and never again bring such destruction to the cosmos. Keleth had kept that vow for 3,000 years until her daughter was taken. Maya asked why Liray had been alone and starving. Keleth's expression darkened, and it was the first real emotion Maya had seen on that ancient face. 3 years ago, Dominion scouts discovered the hidden world where Keleth lived with Liray. Keleth tried to stay hidden to honor her vow. But the Dominion did not come to negotiate. They came with weapons and soldiers, and they took Liray to force Keleth into service. For 3 years, Keleth searched through Dominion space following rumors and whispers. She could not attack openly without breaking her vow completely. She could only search and hope. Finally, Liray escaped during a prison transport accident. The child had fled to the nearest space station she could find. That station was Outpost 7. Katie spoke up with her voice shaking. She asked what the Dominion wanted with Liray, and why they would risk making an enemy of something as powerful as Keleth. Keleth turned those ancient eyes on Katie and explained. The Dominion Empire was not what humanity thought. The species that humans had been fighting for 7 years were slaves themselves. Something ancient controlled them. Something that wore their leaders' faces and used their bodies like puppets. That the war humanity was losing was being fought with stolen technology. The Dominion had found Elithor ruins and artifacts and reverse-engineered them. But artifacts were not enough. They wanted the living Elithor and their bonded dragons. If they captured and controlled even one Dragon Lord, they could extinguish all free life in this part of the galaxy. Maya felt cold spreading through her body. She asked how many Elithor were left. How many Dragon Lords existed that the Dominion could find? Keleth's answer made the room go silent. 23. 23 Elithor still lived, scattered across space. Most were in hiding, like Keleth had been. 3 had been captured by the Dominion and were being held in research facilities. 2 had gone mad from loneliness and isolation over the thousands of years, and 1 had chosen a dark path that Keleth would not speak about. Then Keleth made her offer. In the ancient tradition of her people, saving Liray's life had created a blood debt that must be honored. She offered humanity a choice. She and Thornscale could destroy the Dominion fleet in this sector. They could buy time for humanity to evacuate and build defenses. But that would be where her obligation ended. She would return to hiding, and humanity would face the true enemy alone. Or if Maya wished, Keleth would break her vow completely. She would teach humanity to fight as the Elithor once did. She would stand beside them in the coming war. She would help them face the true enemy that controlled the Dominion. But there was a cost. If Keleth raised her hand in war again, the other Elithor would notice. Some driven mad by the ancient war might wake. The Dragon Lords who chose dark paths might return. Forces that could doom or save the galaxy would begin to stir. Maya had to decide. Accept temporary salvation and face the enemy alone later, or risk awakening ancient powers that might destroy everything. The command center was quiet. Maya looked at the tactical display showing Dominion forces regrouping in the distance. She thought about the colonies that would burn if they did nothing. She thought about the children who would die. She thought about Earth itself far away, but not safe if the Dominion won. She looked at Lyrae standing next to her mother. The child had survived impossible odds and escaped captivity to find help. She had trusted a human stranger when she had every reason to fear. She looked at Keleth, an ancient being who had kept a vow of isolation for 3,000 years, who had searched for her daughter for 3 years without breaking that vow, who was now willing to risk everything to repay a simple act of kindness. Maya made her choice. We fight together. Keleth nodded, and something like relief passed across her face. She placed her hand over her heart again, then held it out to Maya. Maya took the offered hand and felt power flow through the touch. It was not painful, but it was overwhelming. She saw flashes of stars being born, of civilizations rising, of the ancient war and the terrible enemy, of Keleth's loneliness across thousands of years. Then the visions faded, and Keleth pulled her hand back. The bond was made. Humanity and the Elithor were now allies. Katie asked what happened next. How did they fight an enemy that controlled entire empires? How did humans learn to stand beside dragon lords? Keleth's answer was simple. They would start by gathering allies. The 3 captured Elithor had to be rescued before the Dominion could weaponize them. The 2 who had gone mad needed to be found and healed if possible. The others in hiding needed to be contacted and convinced to break their vows. It would be dangerous. Many would die. But it was the only path that led to victory instead of extinction. Maya asked how long they had. Keleth looked at the tactical display where the Dominion fleet was pulling back and regrouping. They would return with more ships, and the true enemy would come with them. The being that controlled the Dominion from the shadows would want to see what had destroyed their cruisers. 2 days, Keleth said. Maybe 3. Then the real war would begin. Maya turned to Katie and started giving orders. Contact Fleet Command. Get every ship in range to this sector. Start evacuation of all non-essential personnel. And find out everything in the database about the Dominion's research facilities. As her crew rushed to obey, Maya felt the weight of what she had agreed to. She had committed humanity to a war that had destroyed galaxies. She had bet everything on an alliance with beings that humans barely understood. She might have just doomed her entire species. But when she looked at Lyrae smiling for the first time since Maya had found her, when she saw hope in Katie's eyes instead of despair, when she felt Keleth standing beside her like an unbreakable wall against the darkness, Maya knew she had made the right choice. Admiral Lisa Grant arrived with the human 5th Fleet, expecting to find Outpost 7 destroyed and everyone dead. Instead, she found Dominion wreckage floating in space, and a dragon the size of a dreadnought coiled around the station like a protective guardian. The meeting between Grant and Keleth was tense. The Admiral was a career military officer who had fought the Dominion for 7 years. She did not trust Eastleigh, and she especially did not trust ancient aliens, who appeared from nowhere with impossible power. But Grant was also smart. She looked at the tactical reports. She saw what Thornscale had done to 3 Dominion cruisers in under 3 minutes. She listened to Maya's account of Keleth's story and the true enemy behind the Dominion. Most importantly, she looked at the projections of what would happen if humanity faced this enemy alone. Grant made her decision. The alliance would stand. Humanity would learn from the Elithor and fight beside them. But Grant had conditions. Keleth would teach human soldiers and pilots. Lyrae would work with intelligence to provide information about Dominion facilities. And Keleth would help rescue the 3 captured. Elithar before the enemy could use them as weapons. Keleth agreed to all of it. The training began the next day. Keleth selected 20 soldiers and pilots who showed potential. Katie was among them. The ancient warrior explained that what she would teach was not magic. It was quantum manipulation and spatial awareness and energy channeling that her people had mastered through millions of years of evolution. Most humans struggled with even the basics. Their minds were not built for perceiving space the way Elithar did, but a few showed remarkable progress. Katie learned to sense ships moving through hyperspace by feeling the ripples they left behind. 2 pilots learned to interface with their fighters in ways that made them faster and more accurate. A young soldier named Amy Chen learned to channel energy through her body to enhance her strength. While the humans trained Liray worked with intelligence officers, she provided detailed maps of Dominion territory and the locations of research facilities. She described the security systems and guard rotations from memory. Most importantly, she revealed where the three captured Lether were being held. The prison facility orbited a dead star deep in Dominion space. It was protected by a fleet of 30 ships and spatial mines that would destroy anything that came too close. The facility itself was designed specifically to hold Elithar prisoners. It had power dampeners and neural disruptors and systems built from stolen technology that even Keleth admitted were impressive. Getting in would be nearly impossible. Getting out with 3 prisoners would be suicide. But they had no choice. If the Dominion succeeded in breaking the captured Elithor and controlling their dragons, the war would be over before it truly began. Maya volunteered to lead the rescue mission. Grant argued against it, but Maya insisted. She had started this alliance by saving Liray. She would see it through. Katie volunteered immediately after. So did Amy and 10 other soldiers who had been training with Keleth. Keleth studied the volunteer list and nodded her approval. Then she made an announcement that shocked everyone. Liray would come with them, Maya protested. The child had suffered enough. She should stay safe on Outpost 7, but Liray stood up and spoke in halting human words she had been learning. She knew the prison. She knew the codes. She had escaped from there once and could guide them through security. More than that, Liray said she had earned the right to save her people. She was small and young, but she was also brave and smart. She would not hide while others fought for her. Keleth placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder with pride in her ancient eyes. The decision was made. Liray would come. The preparation took 3 days. Keleth taught Maya and Katie how to ride Dragon back through space. It was an experience that defied everything they knew about physics. Thornscale's scales were warm under their hands, and they could feel his heartbeat like distant thunder. When he flew through the void, it felt like the universe was bending around them. Thornscale was patient with the humans, despite his terrifying power. He moved gently when they were on his back and seemed to understand that they were fragile compared to his kind. Katie swore she felt him laugh when she nearly fell off during a sharp turn. On the evening before departure, Maya found Keleth standing alone in the observation deck staring at the stars. The ancient warrior looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. Maya asked if she was afraid. Keleth was quiet for a long moment before answering. She said she was not afraid of battle or death. She had faced both countless times. What she feared was hope. For 3,000 years, Keleth had lived in isolation, believing she would never fight beside allies again. Believing her people were too scattered and broken to ever unite. Now she had hoped that things could be different, and hope was more terrifying than any enemy because hope could be lost. Maya understood. She asked why Keleth fought. Why she cared about humans she had just met. Why she was willing to risk everything for a species that was young and weak compared to the Elithar. Keleth turned from the stars and looked at Maya with those ancient eyes. Her answer was simple and honest. Because you cared about one small starving child when you had every reason not to. That is worth fighting for. That is worth dying for. The next morning, the strike team assembled. 3 human ships equipped with Elithor cloaking technology. Keleth and Thornscale. 15 commandos, including Maya, Katie, Amy, and Liray. They had one chance to rescue 3 prisoners from the most secure facility in Dominion. Space Admiral Grant gave them her blessing and a warning. The Dominion knew something had destroyed their cruisers. They would be ready for another attack. The fleet waiting at the prison facility would be on high alert, Keleth assured her that the Dominion did not know what was coming. They thought the Elithar were extinct or powerless. They had no idea that the Dragon Lords were waking up. The strike team boarded their ships. Thornscale took his position with Maya and Katie on his back, secured by harnesses that Keleth had created. Liray rode with her mother in the ancient ship. The other commandos divided between the 3 human vessels. Grant gave the order, and they jumped into hyperspace, heading toward the dead star and the prison that orbited it. As space twisted around them, Maya thought about Keleth's words. Hope was terrifying because it could be lost. But hope was also the only thing worth fighting for. They would rescue the prisoners or die trying. Either way, the galaxy would know that humanity and the Elethar stood together, that the Dragon Lords had returned, that the ancient enemy hiding behind the Dominion had made a terrible mistake. The war was about to truly begin. The prison facility appeared exactly where Lorray said it would be. The dead star cast a red glow across the massive structure that looked more like a fortress than a prison. 30 Dominion ships patrolled in defensive formations, and the spatial mines created a deadly net that nothing should be able to pass through, but Keleth's cloaking technology was not. From this era, the 3 human ships and Thornscale slipped through the minefield like ghosts. The Dominion sensors saw nothing. Their guards noticed nothing. The strike team was inside the defensive perimeter before anyone knew they were there. Lorray guided them through. Approach vectors that she had memorized during her captivity. The child's memory was perfect. Every patrol route, every sensor blind spot, every weakness in the prison's defenses. She remembered it all. They docked at a maintenance port that Lorray said was rarely used. The commandos flooded into the facility with weapons ready. Maya led one team, while Katie led another. Amy and her squad provided rear security. Keleth moved through the corridors like a shadow with Lorray close behind. The prison interior was cold and sterile. The walls were lined with technology that hummed with power designed to contain beings who could break planets. Maya felt her skin crawl as they moved deeper. This place was built for torture disguised as research. They found the first prisoner in a chamber 3 levels down. She was floating in a containment field with dozens of cables attached to her body. Her name was Morel, and she had been here for 2 years. Her eyes were closed and her breathing was shallow. The Dominion had been draining her knowledge and power slowly. Keleth moved to the containment controls, and her hands flew over the alien interface. The field dissolved, and Morel collapsed. Katie caught her before she hit the floor. The woman was weak and thin, but alive. Her eyes opened and focused on Keleth with recognition and relief. Morel tried to speak, but her voice was broken. Keleth touched her forehead gently, and something passed between them. Understanding. Reassurance. The promise that she was safe. Now they found the second prisoner, 2 levels deeper. His name was Soren, and he had been captive for 3 years. But when Keleth opened his containment field, something was wrong. Soren's eyes opened and they were not right. Dark veins spread across his silver skin. His expression was twisted with rage and madness. Soren attacked Keleth without warning. His power was distorted and chaotic, but still devastating. He launched energy blasts that tore through the walls. He moved faster than human eyes could follow. Keleth barely blocked the first strike. Maya ordered her team back as the 2 Elethor fought through the prison corridors. The battle was brutal and terrifying. Reality itself seemed to bend around them. Metal melted. Gravity reversed. Time stuttered and jumped. Keleth was stronger and more skilled, but she was trying not to kill. Soren, she fought defensively, trying to subdue him without permanent harm. Maya watched in horror as she realized what had happened. The Dominion had infected Soren with something. The same parasitic entity that controlled their leaders. Outside the prison, Thornscale and Soren's Dragon Stormwing were locked in combat. The 2 massive creatures tore through space around the facility. Their battle was visible across the entire star system. Ships fled in panic. The spatial mines detonated in chain reactions. The carefully organized defensive fleet scattered. Inside, Katie made a decision that would save Soren's life and nearly cost her own. She had been training with Keleth for days, learning to channel and manipulate energy. The techniques were dangerous for humans. Their bodies were not built for it. But Katie did it anyway. She reached out with her mind and found the prison's control systems. The same systems that had infected Soren. Katie poured energy through herself and into the network. She fed it false data and disrupted the parasitic entity's connection. The process burned through her nervous system like fire. Soren collapsed as the infection lost its hold. Katie fell a second later unconscious and barely breathing. Amy rushed to her side while Maya stood frozen, watching her best friend pay the price for their victory. They found the third prisoner, low and in the deepest level. She was in worse condition than Morel, but not infected like Soren. Kelleth freed her quickly, and the strike team began their retreat with 3 rescued prisoners and 1 human on the edge of death. The alarms were screaming now. The Dominion knew they were here. Ships converged on the prison from every direction. The 30-ship defensive fleet reformed and blocked all escape routes. And then something worse arrived. A massive Dominion flagship dropped out of hyperspace. It was twice the size of any ship Maya had ever seen. The hull was covered in weapons and armor and technology that made her tactical sensors scream warnings. On the command deck stood Admiral Vakros, the most feared commander in the Dominion fleet. But Kelleth looked at the flagship and her expression turned to cold fury. She told Maya that Vakros was not really Vakros. The Admiral's body was a shell. Inside was a Vexerneer, one of the parasitic entities from the ancient war. The true enemy that had nearly destroyed the Elithor. The Battle of the Dead Star began. 3 Elithor and their dragons, supported by human ships and pilots, faced 200 Dominion vessels. It should have been impossible. The numbers were overwhelming. But the dragons of legend had returned, and they were done hiding. Thornscale and Stormwing fought with perfect coordination despite Stormwing being weakened from captivity. Morel and Alawan channeled their power through the human ships, making them faster and stronger than they had any right to be. Kelleth stood at the center of it all, directing the battle with 3,000 years of experience. Maya watched from her ship's bridge as physics stopped making sense. Dragons moved through space faster than light. Energy beams bent around friendly vessels and struck enemies with perfect accuracy. Human pilots performed maneuvers their ships should not survive, but did anyway because ancient power protected them. The Dominion fleet began to break. Ships exploded or fled or simply stopped functioning as their systems failed. But Vakras's flagship kept coming. The Vexeneer wanted Kelleth. It wanted to infect her and claim the most powerful Elithor for itself. The flagship's hull split open, and something emerged. The Vexerneer's true form was shadow and screaming void light. It was vast and hungry and ancient. It reached for Kelleth, trying to infect her, trying to break her. Kelleth stood her ground. She spoke for the first time with real emotion, calling upon oaths made millions of years ago. She called upon bonds forged in fires that consumed stars. Thornscale responded, and their connection blazed like a newborn sun. The Vexerneer screamed as it burned, unable to withstand the pure focused power of an Elithor, who fought not from rage or duty but from love. Love for her daughter who had survived. Love for the humans who had shown kindness. Love for the future that might still be saved. The Vexerneer entity died, and Vakras's body collapsed empty. The surviving Dominion ships ceased fighting. Their crews were freed from parasitic control and had no idea where they were or what they had been doing. Others requested asylum. The battle was won, but the war had only begun. Katie woke 3 weeks later in Medical Bay. Kelleth visited her personally, which the ancient warrior rarely did. She named Katie as Oath Sister, the first human to receive such honor. She promised to teach her the deeper mysteries if Katie chose that path. Katie accepted without hesitation. Maya was promoted to Commodore and given command of the new human Elithor Alliance fleet. Outpost 7 became a symbol, the place where 2 species chose to stand together. Lorraine stayed with Maya, having adopted the captain as guardian and mother. 3 more Elithor arrived over the following months. 2 were sane and willing to fight. 1 was twisted by ancient madness and had to be subdued and healed. Their dragons emerged from hiding, each one unique, each one devastating. The balance of power in the galaxy shifted. The Dominion Empire fragmented. Some regions were freed from Vexerneer control. Others remained infected. Civil war erupted. Humanity found itself thrust into a conflict older than its civilization, fighting alongside beings who remembered. When stars were young, on the observation deck of humanities, New flagship Maya stood with Keleth watching. As Human and Elithor crews trained together, Liray played with human children nearby, teaching them songs in the old tongue. Thornscale rested coiled around the ship's hull content for the first time in 3,000 years. Maya asked if Keleth regretted breaking her vow of silence and isolation. The ancient warrior was quiet, then smiled. The first true smile Maya had seen from her. "You gave me back my daughter," Keleth said. "That is worth breaking any vow. That is worth fighting any war." But deep in uncharted space, sensors detected new signals. More Elithor were waking, and not all of them remembered the old oaths. Some dragons, driven mad by millennia of loneliness, were hungry. The war against the Vexor near continued, but new threats emerged. Maya, Keleth, and Liray stood together watching the stars, ready for whatever came next. A human, an ancient warrior, and a child who survived the impossible. The alliance that would either save the galaxy or watch it burn. But they would face it together, and that made all the difference.